Welcome, everybody, to the Hypnotic Sunday service. Today, I'm going to talk about the truth behind hypnosis, past life regressions, and reality creation, alternate realities, many worlds, and how that can relate to hypnosis. So, the first thing I want you to really understand about hypnosis is it's three things at its core, and that is belief, expectation, and imagination. A lot of people will use this as a way to criticize hypnosis and dismiss it as not being real, or it's any benefit from it is just the placebo effect. To which I say, well, that's one hell of a placebo effect because of the changes we can get from it. I mean, it would be like a mega placebo. And if it actually works, is it really a placebo effect? I mean, or what exactly does that mean at that point when we actually get results that we want from it? And I specialize in anxiety, helping people overcome that and regain their confidence. And especially after Bell's palsy and synkinesis. And with hypnosis, I actually regained my ability to whistle after 8 years of not being able to because of synkinesis and how that affected my face. So if it's a placebo, I mean, it worked. And that's all I really care about. And one of the popular uses of hypnosis is I get asked about this a lot, is past life regression stuff. Now, I don't do past life regressions. I don't do regression at all, unless it's absolutely necessary. And I feel like that is the best way forward with a client. But it's not something I like to do. And past life regression, I just don't do. Um, it's interesting, and enough people ask me about it. I'm considering it. But the thing about past life regression, and this is a question that comes up, is it real? And honestly, it doesn't matter if it's real or not, if it works. And again, belief, expectation, and imagination. These are the things that really make hypnosis work. And if somebody believes that they have to experience a past life, something there to help them out in the present to resolve an issue, and that's what their mind generates. And I honestly believe that it is just the mind generating something that will make what they need to hear to get the changes done in a way that's how they're best going to process it, best going to handle it. And it works, then it works. Yeah, but I, there's that case of false memory that can happen, and I mean, we create false memories all the time. Anytime we've misremembered something, oh, I could have sworn in that show they were wearing a green shirt, but instead it was blue. I like that's a false memory. Yeah, but most of the time it's inconsequential and we can just dismiss it. When it comes to change work, and the reason I don't like doing regression with hypnosis is because I don't want people necessarily thinking that something they experienced that isn't real is real. I mean, we want the changes, but that belief of this is something that actually happened that can then change everything, that's something I don't necessarily want to take on or expose somebody to without having them understand the nature of what they're experiencing. I it's absolutely possible, that it, absolutely possible that past life regression could be real. I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand. And the reason for that is, I mean, we do have genetic memories, you know, it, traits that get passed down over generations. There's a famous experiment done with mice where it was like they poisoned something cherry flavored. And so they would give the mice food and they learn to, oh, this is cherry. We're going to avoid that because it makes us sick, that sort of thing. So they're treating it as poisonous. Then, but that was something that got passed down. So like generations removed from these mice, the the grandkids and great grandkids of those mice just inherited that. They had this natural aversion to the cherry flavor. Like, okay, they weren't taught that. It was just there. It was something that it was such an emotional thing because it directly impacts survival. And that's a huge thing, right? Everything that we do is meant to help us survive. All our best and worst impulses, there's some sort of perceived benefit to our survival in them. And so when these mice that they had no experience with the cherry, they weren't taught this, they just naturally avoided it. It somehow got genetically passed down. So in that respect, I mean, we get traits passed down from our parents, and therefore from our grandparents, and oh, well, that skips a generation, goes here. So it's very, very possible that if we are having a past life regression, that maybe there is something there experiencing it. I can't say for sure, and I believe personally that it's not, that it's just an idea being presented to us in a way that's more digestible, that's more enjoyable for us to be open to the changes that we want. It's what we need to hear, what we need to experience in that moment. And I'm not saying it's not effective. I absolutely believe that it is. It's just not something I do for that reason. And that's just me personally. And the same thing with regression in general, which I have more of an issue with, um, because that's not like a past life. It's not like a story that we can, you know, go, oh, yeah, this happened and maybe it is or isn't real. It doesn't matter. With like age regression, that's something that, one, I mean, if you're dealing with trauma and everything and you're putting yourself right into that situation again and having to experience it, people can re-traumatize themselves, or that's their excuse to not change because, again, the mind is going to be resistant to change because it thinks it's doing the best work it can to um, keep us safe, to help us survive. And so experiencing that over again, that can push people away, that can give them, oh, well, this is too much. I need to stop. I'm not ready for this. That's one thing they can handle. Usually in, if somebody not skilled enough in it is doing it, that's something that's more likely to happen than not. Um, but then there's that idea we're really good at making up stories, at filling in gaps. We are that's one of the reasons why humans are, at the top of the food chain, and we're the dominant species on the planet, is because we can think, imagine, create in ways that other animals cannot. And we can explore these sort of concepts about the world around us, about where we live. We fill in gaps. This is why conspiracy theories become so popular, is because we're really good at making connections, at solving puzzles, fitting things in to boxes. Okay, this makes sense. So boom, boom, boom. And what we put in there isn't necessarily real. Like everything can start with a kernel of truth, but then we can take it to a completely made up place, that's no basis in reality. And if we're dealing with age regression, well, the idea is you're going back to this memory and this is what happened and blah, blah, blah. We could be filling in gaps with things that we're just generating from our imagination that makes sense, that never actually happened. I don't like that personally. I don't like the idea of that. And it's different than, like, okay, if we're remembering something wrong. It's kind of the same thing, but to me, there's a ethics concern there. I want you to understand that it's not necessarily real. Our memories are based on emotion. They change anytime we access them, depending on our emotional state at the time of accessing them. We can look at a happy memory, but if we're sad and we look at it from another angle, that happy memory becomes a sad memory. Or we can do the same thing the other way. A sad memory can become a happy memory. There can be some sort of joy around it, but really it was pretty dark, and that's something that I'm concerned about, how the client might perceive things and might take that with them. This is why I prefer to work content free, where I don't need to know about the issue. You don't need to explain the trauma. We go in, we're dealing with the emotions surrounding it, and we're neutralizing it, and we're getting it flowing the same way. It's neutralized with regression, only we don't have to do regression to get that. And I'm a firm believer that we don't have to revisit a past event in order to change our emotional reactions to it in the present. And because if we think of things, okay, think of a string going from past, present, future, like 3 knots in it, right? And something happens back here, and we pluck that string, and the whole thing is vibrating. We can grab it wherever, and we can stop it. And that's essentially what we're doing with hypnosis. We're dealing in the now. With anxiety, we're looking forward. We're looking at all these potential threats that don't exist. We're imagining it, we're making it up, and in the present, our body is experiencing it, the feelings, as if that's actually happening. Something that hasn't happened yet, that probably isn't going to happen. In the present, we are feeling our body react as if we were experiencing that in the now, this hypothetical future event. So we don't need to go back to stop that. We don't even have to go forward and look at that event. We just have to deal with the emotions and change our reaction to it, our relationship with them, and how we react to it. And that's something hypnosis is great at. Now, how does this all kind of tie into that idea of creating our reality, of many worlds, all of that stuff? Well, we create our reality based on our perception, right? That's really what it's all about. If we perceive things to be terrible, we're going to adjust our reticular activating system, and we are going to find all sorts of justifications for why everything is so awful, why I can't do this, why blah blah blah. This is how we make our excuses to keep ourselves in the same place, subconsciously, because the unknown is scary. The unknown makes it more difficult for us to fulfill that base biological drive for survival. So the devil you know is better than the one that you don't, essentially. And but if we look at things a little differently, if we start to look at what we have instead of what we don't have, all the great things about us that make us unique, because every single person is you're special. You are completely unique. There is nobody in existence like you. And if you look at things from that perspective, and all of the great things about yourself that make you unique, how does that change the world that you live in now? If you're not focused on what you don't have, if you're letting go of the wanting, if you're letting go of the fear when it comes to anxiety, and you're being present, you're in the now, and you're experiencing the moment, and you're actually there for it, how does that change everything around you? How does that change the story you tell yourself about who you are? I'll tell you right now, it makes it a lot easier to go out, do things a little differently than you would have. And that is how we actually bring the changes that we want to see into the world. And this is really important when it comes to anxiety and getting over that, because we have to go out and test it. And that can be tough. I know, like when I was dealing with agoraphobia, the last thing I wanted to do was go out into the world and be around people. But that's how we grow, is we embrace the tension of that feeling. We go out and we step into it, and we embrace it. We don't have to take on like too much at once, but just enough to see, oh yeah, I've got this. And then you start adding a little more and a little more. It is like lifting weights. And then before you know it, you wake up and you're like, wait, everything's changed. And that anxiety is completely a thing of the past. I remember when I started doing self hypnosis work for it. I was new to self hypnosis, I didn't know if I was doing it right. I didn't know if I was giving myself the right suggestions, that sort of thing. And then I wake up one day and I go out into the world, and like I had been doing this for a couple months at that point, and then I'm like, wait a minute, that thing that was bugging me that I started working on, like, that's not even there. I would completely forgotten what it even was in the first place that I was doing, but I knew it was gone. And that changed everything. That realization that I'd been going around and the change had already been made, you know. And that's a great feeling. And that's also with hypnosis, we can call it the apex problem, where it works so well we don't realize that that it worked. It's just like, oh, well, it's always been like that. And that's how I feel now when I look back at where I was before hypnosis, before I tried it, before I learned it, before I became a hypnotist to help other people. When I would have a panic attack leaving the house, to now, I can't imagine being that person again. Like, I look back, it does not seem like me at all. I mean, it wasn't me. It was and it wasn't. And that's what made it so frustrating, because that wasn't who I am. But now that it's gone, and it's that point where it's like the idea of that, it's hard to even conceptualize feeling like that ever again. And that is the freedom that hypnosis can give to you. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't going to be situations where you will feel anxious. I always say we are hardwired to feel it. It is a survival mechanism. You know, we are going to experience stress. We are going to experience anger. We are going to experience fear. We're built for it. They have a purpose. They are not good or bad. They just are. But it's not something that you worry about. You lose that fear of experiencing it. And that makes embracing any tension that you run into going out in the world, living your life, that much easier to handle. And that doesn't mean that you're suddenly Superman, but it makes it easier to walk that path if that's where you want to go to. You know, but we still have to walk the path. And I've been thinking about reality shifting kind of along those lines of, you know, what we most often do in hypnosis is just changing our perception, the angle that we're looking at things, you know, kind of coming out with fresh eyes from a different perspective, and it making, you know, the same thing look completely different. And that's a beautiful thing. But I know there are a lot of people the same way there are a lot of people into past life regression that want to shift realities, like, oh, I'm gonna go to this parallel reality. And I believe in many worlds theory. You know, I believe that every choice creates a parallel reality where we're doing things different, where we already have everything that we want to change in this one. There's a world out there where it's already done, because we made a series of choices. If one thing is different in our life, everything becomes different. You know, but the fact is, our consciousness is fixed in this reality, in the one that we're in, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. There's a concept that we use in hypnotherapy called like parts or ego states, the NLP um, thing, where we have different parts that are in control of all our aspects of life. If you think about it as a classroom full of kids, and then the teacher, which would be us, is there at the head of the class. Now, if the teacher leaves the room for a second, puts a kid in charge, that kid goes to the front of the class, keeps it on everybody. They're in the executive position at that point. They're in charge. And parts work like that. So if we're always swapping them in and out, like right now, the part of me that is a hypnotist is speaking to you. And I'm speaking to you differently than I would be talking to my friends. Yeah, that's just a fact. We do that. Not that much differently, but 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 still differently because I'm also in. There's a part that's a teacher that's there helping out too, and then there's another part that's the public speaker. Boom, and they're all kind of working together to do this, but they're always swapping in and out. So like if you're driving down the road, maybe there's a part of you that's a race car driver, with super reflexes and all that. And there's an accident in front of you and you swerve out of the road, out of the way real quick and you avoid it. That part jumped into the executive position and then jumps back out. So they're there when we need them. And the idea is we can have a part that doesn't want to change, like, oh, because they're doing this job and we just have to talk to them and go, hey, I know what you're trying to do and that's good, but we need to try things a little differently, and that doesn't mean that you aren't needed, you are, but could you try doing it this way instead? And usually they're happy to do that because they want what's best for us. So if we have all of these parts, I think of then our higher self. That's something that gets used a lot. This highest wisdom state, which theoretically has all the answers of the things that we need, that isn't limited by whatever blocks we might have consciously. I would say that we are in our reality a part of that, and all the other infinite parallel worlds and everything are also parts of that highest wisdom state. And by doing that, we can access the energy of the others and kind of get on the same page. The same way the hypnotist part, the teacher part, the public speaker part would all work together. Now, for me to talk to you, we can align ourselves energetically with the alternate reality parts, these other versions of us, because they are us. They're not different. They are us. Then once we're on that wavelength, we start behaving more like that. And we start changing our current reality as we embody more of the traits that these other versions of us have. This is a very, very simplified version because I'm being quick about it today. And it's something I'm really diving more into detail with in future videos, future programs I'm working on, which I'm really excited about. Now, whether you believe it's real or not, it doesn't matter. That's the great thing about this, because if you can imagine it, then you can still benefit and bring the changes in. It's a model, and everything that we do is modeling, essentially. The idea of parts is a model of the brain, the conscious and subconscious, separating those two. It's a model. There is no subconscious, really. We can't identify it. Nobody's ever found the subconscious, but it's a model. It explains things. It's easy for us to understand. And as we get into that, the thing our minds love is stories, emotions, because that is what really drives us, our emotions and metaphors, because it frames it in a way that's easy for us to understand or makes sense on a different level. And one of the things that really drives a idea or a belief into so it becomes a permanent change is an emotional charge attached to it. That's how we change, like, for better or for worse. you know there's usually two things involved in putting something into our subconscious mind that forms a belief or a pattern, and that's emotion and repetition. And experiencing it over and over again with a extreme emotional charge, it becomes a belief, it becomes a pattern, it becomes a habit, it becomes a program that runs anytime we go out. Like anxiety, which has a huge emotional charge to it. If you've experienced a panic attack, it's something that you never want to experience again. And boom, so there's a emotional charge there. That is we must avoid this at all costs, that then drives the rest of our behavior. But if that emotional charge isn't there, if we neutralize it, then that block goes away. And then we're free to start doing other things. What other things? Well, we must have an idea. We must have an idea of what we would be like if this wasn't something that was holding us back. And that would be the idea of the parallel reality, right? The version of us who was living in courage while we were stuck in fear. And what would that version of us be like? What would they experience? How would they be different? What is their energy like? How can we then start to model that in our lives, in this reality, and then start creating our own reality, creating this life to be what we want, instead of just being dragged along by emotional reactions. I hope this has been informative, and I hope you guys have a great week. And remember, there are no such thing as problems, there are only situations. So until next time, be seeing you.